Welcome to a brand new series here at Bloore and Mandalore. We are doing our next installment of Audible on Mandalore, and today we have got the incredible book by Timothy Zahn, Star Wars: Heir to the Empire. Now, this book is a massive fan favorite. I mean, this is a part of the Essential Legends collection. This is one of the most revered books, and Timothy Zahn absolutely hit it out of the park. Now, I've never actually read this before. I've only seen reviews, and I've only seen breakdowns by other creators, and I've got to say, it's made me really, really excited to read this one. Now, what I'm going to be doing with this is I'm going to be turning this into a 10-part series where I'm going to be narrating the whole audiobook for all of you. And we are also going to be doing a little bit of a breakdown and analysis at the end of each episode, just to kind of get our head around what's happened. Now, I mean, again, this is my first time reading this, so forgive me for any names that I mispronounce. If I get anything wrong, I'm learning along with you guys, but this is something that I've been very, very excited for. And if it's something that you like, please feel free, like and subscribe. I'd be very, very grateful. Now, if you want to read this at home along with me, please do. This is just going to be narrating it for you guys. So don't feel any pressure if you don't want to. If you just want to sit back, relax, and enjoy some books, man, this is going to be a journey. So before we get started, thank you so much for clicking on this video. Thank you so much for watching this far, and I hope you guys enjoy. Let's start with Chapter 1. Captain Pelion, a voice called down from the portside crew pit through the hum of background conversation. Message from the sentry line. The scout ships have just come out of lightspeed. Pelion, leaning over the shoulder of the man at the Chimera's bridge engineering monitor, ignored the shout. Trace this line for me, he ordered, tapping a light pen at the schematic on the display. The engineer threw a questioning glance up at him. Sir? I heard him, Pelion said. You have an order, Lieutenant. Yes, sir, the other said carefully, and keyed for the trace. Captain Pelion? The voice repeated, closer this time. Keeping his eye on the engineering display, Pelion waited until he could hear the sound of approaching footsteps. Then, with all the regal weight and 50 years spent in the Imperial fleet gave to a man, he straightened up and turned. The young duty officer's brisk walk faltered, came to an abrupt halt. Sir? He looked into Pelion's eyes, and his voice faded away. Pelion let the silence hang in the air for a handful of heartbeats, long enough for those nearest to notice. This is not a cattle market at Shomhi, Lieutenant Shell, he said at last, keeping his voice calm but icy cold. This is the bridge of an Imperial Star Destroyer. Routine information is not, repeat, not, simply shouted in the general direction of its intended recipient. Is that clear? Shell swallowed. Yes, sir. Pelion held his eyes a few seconds longer, and lowered his head in a slight nod. Now report. Yes, sir. Shell swallowed again. We've just received word from the sentry ship, sir. Scouts have returned from their scan raid of the Obra system. Very good, Pelion nodded. Did they have any trouble? Only a little, sir. The natives apparently took exception to them, pulling a dump of their central library system. The wing commander said there was some attempt at pursuit, but he had lost them. I hope so, Pelion said grimly. Obra held a strategic position in the borderland regions, and intelligence reports indicated that the New Republic was making a strong bid for its membership and support. If they had an armed emissary ships at the time of the raid, well, he'd know soon enough. Have the wing commander reports to the bridge ready room with his report as soon as the ships are aboard, he told Shell. And have the sentry line go to yellow alert. Dismissed. Yes, sir. Spinning around with a reasonably good imitation of a proper military turn, the lieutenant headed back towards the communications console. The young lieutenant, which was Pelion, thought with a trace of old bitterness, where the problem really lay. In the old days, at the height of the Empire's power, it would have been inconceivable for a man as young as Shell to serve as a bridge officer aboard a ship like the Chimera. Now, He looked down at the equally young man at the engineering monitor. Now, in contrast, the Chimera had virtually no one aboard except young men and women. Slowly, Pellaeon let his eyes sweep across the bridge, feeling the echoes of old anger and hatred twist through his stomach. There had been many commanders in the fleet, he knew, who had seen the Emperor's original Death Star as a blatant attempt to bring the Empire's vast military power more tightly under his direct control, just as he had already done with the Empire's political power. The fact that he'd ignored the battle station's proven vulnerability and gone ahead with the second Death Star had merely reinforced that suspicion. There would have been a few in the fleet's upper echelons who would have genuinely mourned its loss. If it hadn't, it had death throes, taken the superstar destroyer Executor with it. Even after 5 years, Pellaeon couldn't help but wince at the memory of that image. The Executor. Out of control, colliding with the unfinished Death Star, and then disintegrating completely in the battle station's massive explosion. The loss of the ship itself had been bad enough, but with the fact that it was an Executor, it made it far worse. The particular superstar destroyer had been Darth Vader's personal ship, and despite the Dark Lord's legendary and often lethal capriciousness, serving aboard it had been perceived as the quick line to promotion, which meant that when the Executor died, so also did the disproportionate fraction of the best young and mid-level officers and crewers. The fleet had never recovered from that fiasco. With the Executor's leadership gone, the battle had quickly turned into a confused rout, with several other Star Destroyers being lost before the order to withdraw and finally had given. Pellaeon himself, taking command when the Chimera's former captain was killed, had done what he could to hold things together, but despite his efforts, they had never regained the initiative against the rebels. Instead, they had steadily pushed back until they were here. Here, in what had once been the backwater of the Empire, with barely a quarter of its former system still under nominal Imperial control. Here, aboard the Star Destroyer manned almost entirely by painstakingly trained but badly inexperienced young people, many of them conscripted from their homeworlds by force or threat of force. Here, under the command of possibly the greatest military mind the Empire had ever seen, Pellaeon smiled, a tight, wolfish smile, as he again looked around his bridge. No, the end of the Empire was not yet, as the arrogantly self-proclaimed New Republic would soon discover. He glanced at his chron. 2:15, Grand Admiral Thrawn's 2:15. Grand Admiral Thrawn would be meditating in his command room now. And if Imperial procedure frowned upon shouting across the bridge, it frowned even harder on interrupting a Grand Admiral's meditation by intercom. One spoke to him in person, or one did not speak to him at all. Continuing tracing those lines, Pellaeon ordered the engineering lieutenant as he headed towards the door. I'll be back shortly. The Grand Admiral's new command room was 2 levels below the bridge, in a space that had once housed the former commander's luxury entertainment suite. When Pellaeon had found Thrawn, or rather, when the Grand Admiral had found him, one of his first acts had been to take over the suite and convert it into what was essentially a second bridge. A secondary bridge, meditation room, and perhaps more. It was no secret about the Chimera that since the recent refitting had been completed, the Grand Admiral had been spending a great deal of his time here. What was secret was exactly he did during those long hours. Stepping to the door, Pellaeon straightened his tunic and braced himself. Perhaps he was about to find out. Captain Pellaeon to see Grand Admiral Thrawn, he announced. I have The door slid open before he finished speaking. Mentally preparing himself, Pellaeon stepped into the dimly lit entry room. He glanced around, saw nothing of interest, and started for the door of the main chamber, 5 paces ahead. A touch of air in the back of his neck was the only warning. Captain Pellaeon, a deep, gravely cat-like voice, mewed into his ear. Pellaeon jumped and spun around, cursing both himself and the short, wiry creature standing less than half a meter away. Blast it, Rook, he snarled. What do you think you're doing? For a long moment, Rook just looked up at him, and Pelion felt a drop of sweat trickle down his back. With his large, dark eyes, protruding jaw, and glistening needle teeth, Rook was even more of a nightmare in the dimness than he was in normal lighting. Especially to someone like Pelion, who knew what Thrawn used Rook for, and his fellow Noghiri for. I'm doing my job, Rook said at last. He stretched his thin arm almost casually out towards the inner door, and Pelion caught just a glimpse of the slender assassin's knife before it vanished somehow in the Noghiri's sleeve. His hand closed, then opened again, steel-wired muscles moving visibly beneath his dark grey skin. You may enter. Thank you, Pelion growled, straightening his tunic again. He turned back to the door. It opened as his approach, and he stepped through. Into a softly lit art museum. He stopped short, just inside the room, and looked around in astonishment. The walls and domed ceiling were covered with flat paintings and planix. A few of them vaguely human-looking, but most of distinctly alien origin. Various sculptures were scattered around, some freestanding, others on pedestals. In the center of the room was a double circle of repeater displays. The outer ring was slightly higher than the inner ring. Both sets of displays, at least from what Pelion could see, also seemed to be devoted to little pictures of artwork. And in the center of the double circle, seated a duplicate of the Admiral's chair on the bridge, was Grand Admiral Thrawn. He sat motionlessly. His shimmering blue-black hair glinted in the dim light, his pale blue skin looking cool and subdued and very alien on his otherwise human frame. His eyes were nearly closed as he leaned back against the headrest, only a glint of red showing between the lids. Pelion licked his lips, suddenly unsure of the wisdom of having invaded Thrawn's sanctum like this. If the Grand Admiral decided to be annoyed, "Come in, Captain," Thrawn said, his quiet modulated voice cutting through Pelion's thoughts. Eyes still closed to slits, he waved a hand in a small and precisely measured motion. "What do you think?" "It's very interesting, sir," was all Pelion could come up with as he walked over to the outer display circle. "All holographic, of course," Thrawn said, and Pelion thought he could hear a note of regret in the other's voice. "The sculptures and flats both. Some of them are lost. Many of the others are now on planets occupied by the rebellion." "Yes, sir," Pelion nodded. "I thought you'd want to know. Admiral, the scouts that returned from the Obra system, the wing commander will be ready for debriefing in a few minutes." Thrawn nodded. Were they able to tap into the central library system? "They got at least a partial dump," Pelion told him. I don't know yet if they were able to complete it. Apparently, there was some attempt at pursuit. The wing commander thinks he lost them, though." For a moment, Thrawn was silent. "No," he said. "No, I don't believe this. Particularly not if the pursuers were from the rebellion." Taking a deep breath, he straightened in his chair, and for the first time since Pelion had entered, opened his glowing red eyes. Pelion returned from the other's gaze without flinching, feeling a small flicker of pride at the achievement. Many of the Emperor's top commanders and courtiers had never learned to feel comfortable with those eyes, or with Thrawn himself for that matter. Which was probably why the Grand Admiral had spent so much of his career in the unknown regions, working to bring those still barbaric sections of the galaxy under Imperial control. His brilliant successes had won him the title of Warlord and the right to wear the white uniform of the Grand Admiral. The only non-human ever granted that honor by the Emperor. Ironically, it had also made him all the more indispensable to the frontier campaigns. Pelion had often wondered how the Battle of Endor would have ended if Thrawn, not Vader, had been commanding the Executor. "Yes, sir," he added. "I've ordered the sentry line onto yellow alert. Shall we go to red?" "Not yet," Thrawn said. We should still have a few minutes. Tell me, Captain, do you know anything about art? Not very much, Pelion managed, thrown a little by the sudden change of subject. I'd never really had much time to devote to it. You should make the time, Thrawn gestured to a part of the inner display circle to his right. Sapphire paintings. He identified them. Circa 1550 to 2200. Pre-Empire date. Note how the style changes. Right there. At the first contact with a Thankora, over there, he pointed at the left-hand wall, are examples of Panid Estra art. Note the similarities with the early Sappho work, and also the mid-18th century pre-Mvakerith fault sculpt. Yes, I see, Pelion said, not entirely truthfully. Admiral, shouldn't we be... He broke off as a shrill whisper split the air. Bridge to Admiral Grand Admiral Thrawn. Lieutenant Shell's taut voice called over the intercom. Sir, we're under attack! Thrawn tapped the intercom switch. This is Thrawn, he said evenly. Go to red alert. Tell me what we've got, calmly if possible. Yes, sir. The muttered alert lights began flashing, and Pelion could hear the sound of the klaxons banging faintly outside the room. Sensors are picking up 4 New Republic assault frigates, Shell continued, his voice tense but under noticeably better control. Plus at least 3 wings of X-Wing fighters. Symmetric cloud formation, or Cloud V formation, coming in on our scout ship's vector. Pelion swore under his breath. A single Star Destroyer with a largely inexperienced crew against 4 assault frigates and their accompanying fighters. Run engines to full power, he called toward the intercom. Prepare to make the jump to light speed. He took a step toward the door. Belay that jump order, Lieutenant, Thrawn said, still glacially calm. TIE fighter crews to their stations. Activate deflector shields. Pelion spun back to him. Admiral! Thrawn cut him off with an unraised hand. Come here, Captain, the Grand Admiral ordered. Let's take a look, shall we? He touched a switch, and abruptly the art show was gone. Instead, the room had become a miniature bridge monitor, with helm, engine, and weapons readouts on the walls, and double display circle. The open space had become a holographic tactical display. In one corner, a flashing sphere indicated the invaders. The wall display nearest to it gave an ETA estimate of 12 minutes. Fortunately, the scout ships have enough of a lead not to be in danger themselves, Thrawn commented. So, let's see exactly what we're dealing with. Bridge order the 3 nearest sentry ships to attack. Yes, sir. Across the room, 3 blue dots shifted out of the sentry line into intercept vectors. From the corner of his eye, Pelion saw Thrawn lean forward in his seat as the assault frigates and accompanying X-Wings shifted in response. One of the blue dots winked out. Excellent, Thrawn said, leaning back in his seat. That will do, Lieutenant. Pull the other 2 sentry ships back and order the Sector 4 line to scramble out of the invaders' vector. Yes, sir, Shell said, sounding more than a little confused. A confusion Pelion would well understand. Shouldn't we at least signal the rest of the fleet? He suggested, hearing the tightness in his voice. The Death's Heed could be here in 20 minutes. Most of the others in less than an hour. The last thing that we want to do right now is bring in more of our ships, Captain, Thrawn said. He looked up at Pelion, and a faint smile touched his lips. After all, there may be survivors, and we wouldn't want the rebellion learning about us, would we? He turned back to his displays. Bridge, I want a 20-degree port yaw rotation. Bring us flat into the invaders' vector, superstructure pointing at them. As soon as they're within the outer perimeter, the Sector 4 sentry line is to reform behind those lines and jam all transmissions. Yes, sir. Sir? You don't have to understand, Lieutenant, Thrawn said, his voice abruptly cold. Just obey. Yes, sir. Pelion took a careful breath as the displays showed the Chimera rotating as per orders. I'm afraid I don't understand either, Admiral, he said, turning our superstructure toward them. Again, Thrawn stopped with an unraised hand. Watch and learn, Captain. That's fine. Bridge, stop rotation and hold positions here. Drop docking bay deflector shields. Boost power to all others. TIE fighter squadrons launch when ready. Head directly away from the Chimera for 2 kilometers, and then sweep around in open cluster formation. Backfire speed, zonal attack pattern. He got an acknowledgement, then looked up at Pellaeon. Do you understand now, Captain? Pellaeon pursed his lips. I'm afraid not, he admitted. I see now that the reason you've turned the ship was to give the fighters some exit cover, but the rest is nothing but a classic Marg Sable closer maneuver. They're not going to fall for anything that simple. On the contrary, Thrawn corrected coolly. Not only will they fall for it, they'll be utterly destroyed by it. Watch, Captain, and learn. The TIE fighters launched and accelerated away from the Chimera, and then leaning hard into etheric rudders to sweep back around it in a spray of some exotic fountain. The invading ships spotted the attackers and shifted vectors. Pelican blinked. What in the Empire are they doing? They're trying the only defense they know of against a Marg Sable, Thrawn said, and there was no mistaking the satisfaction in his voice. Or to be more precise, the only defense they are psychologically capable of attempting. He nodded towards the flashing sphere. You see, Captain, there's an Elom commanding that force, and Eloman simply cannot handle the unstructured attack profile of a properly executed Marg Sable. Pellaeon stared at the invaders, still shifting into their utterly useless defense stance, and slowly it dawned on him what Thrawn had just done. That sentry ship attack a few minutes ago, he said. You were able to tell from that those were the Eloman ships? Learn about art, Captain, Thrawn said, his voice almost dreamy. When you understand a species' art, you understand that species. He straightened in his chair. Bridge, bring us to flank speed. Prepare to join the attack. An hour later, it was all over. The ready room door slid shut behind the wing commander, and Pellaeon gazed back at the map still on display. Sounds like Obraskai is a dead end, he said regretfully. There's no way we'll be able to spare the manpower that much pacification would cost. For now perhaps, Thrawn agreed, but only for now. Pellaeon frowned across the table at him. Thrawn was fiddling with a data card, rubbing it absently between finger and thumb. He stared at the viewport at the stars, out the viewport at the stars. A strange smile played about his lips. Admiral? He asked carefully. Thrawn turned his head, those glowing eyes coming to rest on Pellaeon. It's the second piece of the puzzle, Captain, he said softly, holding up the data card. The piece I've been searching for, now for over a year. Abruptly, he turned to the intercom, jabbed it on. Bridge, this is Grand Admiral Thrawn. Signal the Death's Head inform Captain Harbord will be temporarily leaving the fleet. He's to continue making tactical surveys of the local systems and pulling data dumps wherever possible, and then set course for a planet called Merkur. The nav computer has its location. The bridge acknowledged, and Thrawn turned back to Pellaeon. You seem lost, Captain, he suggested. I take it you've never heard of Merkur? Pellaeon shook his head, trying without success to read the Grand Admiral's expression. Should I have? Probably not. Most of those who had been smugglers, malcontents, and otherwise useless dregs of the galaxy. He paused, taking a measured sip of the mug at his elbow, a strong Forvish ale from the smell of it, and Pellaeon forced himself to remain silent. Whatever the Grand Admiral was going to tell him was obviously going to tell him in his own way and time. I ran across an offhand reference to it some 7 years ago, Thrawn continued, setting his mug back down. What caught my attention was the fact that although the planet had been populated for at least 300 years, both the Old Republic and the Jedi of that time had always left it strictly alone. He cocked one blue-black eyebrow slightly. What would you infer from that, Captain? Pelion shrugged. That it's a frontier planet, somewhere too far away from anyone to care about? Very good, Captain. That was my first assumption too. Except that it's not. Merca is in fact no more than 150 light years from here, close to our border with the Rebellion and well within the Old Republic's boundaries. Thrawn dropped his eyes to the data card still in his hand. No, the actual explanation is far more interesting and far more useful. Pelion looked at the data card too. And that explanation became the first piece of the puzzle of yours? Thrawn smiled at him. Again, Captain, very good. Yes, Merca, or more precisely, one of its indigenous animals, was the first piece. The second is on a world called Wayland. He waved the data card. A world for which, thanks to Honobrons, I finally have a location. I congratulate you, Pelion said, suddenly tired of this game. May I ask just what exactly this puzzle is? Thrawn smiled. A smile that sent a shiver up Pelion's back. Why, the only puzzle worth solving, of course. The Grand Admiral said softly. The complete, total, and utter destruction of the Rebellion. Chapter 1 complete. That was incredible. That was genuinely incredible. I think what this one does so well is it shows the initial point of the Empire outside of the destruction of the big Death Star. I think what's interesting about this is you're seeing Thrawn as that cool, calm, and collected guy that at the point that this book was made was not really common. What we're seeing here is a cool, calculated killer. And what it does is it shows us not only the Empire's strength, but it also shows the weakness of the Rebellion. I think for a lot of people in that, we get to see why Thrawn was so successful. He not only analyzed just tactics and war rituals and multiple species, but he accessed and tapped into every single bit of their history, their culture, working to a point where he could break down every single movement that they would make based purely on how they grew up. I think that's something so terrifying about a genuine good villain. Now, I'm not saying good as in someone who is, good in the sense of good and bad. I'm talking about good at being a villain. I think to have someone like this, to have someone who is so viciously protective against this fallen empire and so driven to ruin the New Republic, I think that brings a lot of fear in itself. And I mean, straight off the bat, I understand. I genuinely understand why we love this so much. I mean, this has been incredible so far. I'm very excited to do more. I think with this one, what I would prefer to do, reading that and seeing just how in-depth these chapters is, that was my very first time reading, is why I probably made a few mistakes, and why I definitely made a few mistakes, and probably got a few words wrong. I feel like this could be a once-a-week chapter thing. This is too good. This is genuinely too good. I'm loving it. I hope you guys like this one. I hope you guys enjoy more. I'm going to pick this one back up next week. We'll see how it goes. I'm very excited. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for watching this far. If you have, I'm keen to see where this goes. I love you all. May the Force be with you always. And remember, this is the way.